Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now today we're taking a look at the new RTX 5050. This one launched last month apparently, but I hadn't been able to find one in the UK until a couple of days ago. We've been quite fortunate here with prices of the 50 series cards, as well as the new AMD 9000 series GPUs too. The cheapest 5050 I could find was this Gainwood Ghost version for £219 brand new. This puts it at about £30 less than the lowest cost 5060s and just £20 less than the cheapest 9060 XT 8GB. Prices will vary depending on where you are in the world of course, but let's take a closer look at this card and see what it's capable of in a handful of games at 1080p. I'll also be including a few comparisons to the aforementioned RTX 5060 at the end of the video to see what we get if we spend the extra. First then, the Gainwood Ghost 5050. This card has 2560 cores, 8GB of GDDR6 and features a 130W TDP requiring a single 8-pin power connector. I really like the aesthetic, an all black design with a subtle light up strip at the top. Under load, I noticed it peak at about 70 to 73 degrees and it's not offensively loud, which is always good. Let's test some games. I tested all of today's games at 1080p, the resolution that I feel is best suited to a card like this. We'll start with Cyberpunk 2077 with the high preset. Now by default this will turn the crowds down to medium, so I turn these back up to high along with the texture quality as well. So we have the high preset with high textures and high crowds for 85 FPS overall, with a 1% low of 61 and a 0.1% low of 56. It was pretty consistent to be honest, even in the busier downtown parts of Night City. Next up we have Counter-Strike 2 with the very high preset with 8x MSAA by default. Now you may want to play with a lower preset considering this is a fast-paced online multiplayer title, but even with the very high preset here we were hitting 215 FPS with a 1% low of 160 and a 0.1% low of 131 during a few matches on the Dust 2 map. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 with high preset and SMAA 2TX hit 82 frames per second, a 1% low of 72 and a 0.1% low of 69, very nice. Now we could enable DLSS and set it to native resolution, DLSS 4 that is, but it impacted our frame rate quite significantly, so I left the default anti-aliasing solution enabled here, and I think the game still looks pretty good. Cranking things up to Ultra will also give us a bit of a hefty performance sacrifice, so high is the best bet at this resolution. As always, for my initial video here I've tried to avoid any upscaling, but we will have to implement it a little later on when we briefly look at ray tracing. Next up we have Baldur's Gate 3, which did a lot better than I expected, even at the Ultra preset with DLAA enabled. We saw 100 frames per second here with a 1% low of 79 and a 0.1% low of 53. So as usual, a few little dips and drops in and around the city here, but nothing significant, and overall it was a pretty decent experience. For the Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered at 1080p of course we have the medium preset, but I did set the reflection quality up to high because it makes the water actually look like water. We also have TAA enabled here for an average of 83 FPS, a 1% low of 62 and as expected a bit of a problematic 0.1% figure. This read 16 overall. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt next, the next gen version of the game with the RT Ultra preset. This is the first and only time that I tested ray tracing today because I don't think it's a particularly good idea to enable it with a card like this unless you're prepared to make some pretty big visual sacrifices. I did enable DLSS 4 here however, using the Nvidia app's override, and with that set to performance mode alongside the RT Ultra preset we saw 55 FPS, a 1% low of 46 and a 0.1% low of 39. So it ran okay, it didn't look too bad, but without DLSS, yeah, wouldn't have been anywhere near this to be honest. Grand Theft Auto 5 Enhanced Edition next with the high RT preset. Now by default this will leave RTGI or Ray Trace Global Illuminations off as well as the high res RT reflections off, but I enabled both of these because these two options make the biggest visual differences to the game. This along with DLAA meant we saw an average of 105 FPS, 1% low of 81 and a 0.1% low of 75. The game looks good and it runs really well. Helldivers 2 next, with the high preset for 89 frames per second, a 1% low of 80, and a 0.1% low of 77. This one is always really consistent. I test it on quite a lot of hardware, and it always runs relatively well. Plus it looks good. I have a lot of fun playing this one, to be honest, and on the 5050, it's no exception. Our penultimate game is Fortnite with the high preset, albeit with nanite off because this will default to on, but I don't feel it's necessary for an online multiplayer title. Of course you can enable it if you want to, but I disabled it here for an average of 129, a 1% low of 103 and a 0.1% low of 73. I also had TAA enabled, and this was running in DX12 mode, which seems to be a bit smoother than DX11. We'll finalise then with Red Dead Redemption 2 with the ultra textures and everything else set to medium and or turned on. We could have gone with the ultra textures and then set everything else to high, but there were a few more dips and drops towards the high 60s, so I felt just to give ourselves a little bit more headroom, I'd stick with medium and the ultra textures here. Overall then we saw 107 FPS with a 1% low of 83 and a 0.1% low of 80, so a nice consistent experience. Now let's compare the 5050 to the 5060 across a few games. I'll have a full side-by-side comparison soon, but I wanted to provide some context here. Let's see what an extra few quid could get you. From what I've tested so far, the 5060 is noticeably faster at 1080p for not a huge amount of money more. Pricing and availability will vary around the world, and it's not as simple as saying just spend the extra, especially if you are on a tight budget. I thought the context would be helpful though. You'll probably see similar gains over the 5050 from the AMD Radeon 9060 XT 8GB too. For further context, we're looking at performance between the RTX 3060 and 4060 here for the 5050, which isn't particularly exciting, but I think this will be popular in the pre-built market, so expect to see it near the top of the Steam hardware survey in a few months. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this card down below. Hopefully I haven't sounded too bad in this video. I've got a really sore throat and I've had to pause about 58 times to try and finish my sentences, but as always, thank you. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already and you want to, of course, and hopefully this is helpful to any of you deciding whether or not the 5050 is the right card for you. Personally, I'd like to see the price a little lower, especially considering this is an 8GB card. If this had 12 gigs, I mean, it would be ideal, to be fair. Just that little extra bit of headroom. It does do okay in games, don't get me wrong, especially in the UK. I think the price to performance makes a lot more sense. Hopefully I've helped you decide whether or not this specific card is right for you though. As always, thanks again, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.